Meeting to order at 1:32. Can you please call the order?
President Trujillo,
Present.
Scott Harris,
Present.
Leah Olivari, Diana Summers,
Present.
Robert Temez, John Valls,
Present.
Alan Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Would anyone like to make any public comments? All good. Mr. Edmonds, any public comments or no? Okay. Okay. Do we have any, did we receive any public comments?
We did not receive any public comments.
Thank you very much. Are there any, did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes? Are there any corrections to the minutes? Mr. Scott?
Yeah, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign? Motion carries. Thank you, Scott. Financial reports.
Good afternoon, Board Chairman and Corporate Director of Finance. Next slide, please. So today we've got we'll be reviewing the financial statements for the 7 months ended April 30th, 2022. The B Corporation began the fiscal year with a fund balance of $7.6 million, almost $7.7 million. Revenues to date received is 4.8, almost 4.9 million. Our expenditures to date are 2.7, almost 2.8 million, leaving an available ending fund balance of 9.7 million. So then looking at the different funding buckets, our affordable housing, and we have two active projects. One is the infill housing program that is for a 2-year period over fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. And then the Alma at Greenwood, which was just recently approved by the board. That does leave us an estimated fund balance of $525,000 at the end of fiscal year 22. Looking at our economic development, and we have multiple projects that are active right now, and we will be receiving the payback from the streets fund of $2.5 million in this fiscal year. So right now we're estimated to have an ending fund balance of almost $8 million in our economic development fund. And then looking at streets, our streets fund, we did have a commitment of $1.2 million for Elizabeth Street for reconstruction on it. That will be spent within, or committed within this fiscal year. And then also the streets fund is reimbursing the economic development fund for the $2.5 million that was borrowed from the economic development fund a couple of years ago. Looking at our sales tax revenue, we're still performing well with 7 months collected. We are $253,000 in excess of where our budgeted revenues were. And we are continuing to have that trend of collecting more than what we had budgeted for. So that does conclude my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Holbert.
thank you.
Presentation items. Mr. Neiman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Board. My name is Neiman Young. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Corpus Christi. Today I'll be discussing a potential funding request. Well, not a potential funding request. Well, it is a potential funding request that we're not asking for today. Rather, I figured that we'd have a conversation today just to give you all a heads up of some of the initiatives that the city staff is thinking about, with the intent of coming back to the board after we do a little bit more diligence and sharpen our pencils with a proper funding request for the board to consider. Currently, the city staff has realized that though it's a best practice of localities of a similar size, the city of Corpus Christi does not currently have what we call gateway signage at the borders and entry points to our community. This lack of signage and lack of branding significantly impacts our economic development and tourism initiatives across the city. And as you all are fully aware, with the new leadership that we do have in the city, economic development and tourism has really been a primary focus of the administration as we move forward. To address this issue, the city staff is working with a design firm, which is Dykema Architects, to assist us with providing proper signage for not only the city, but for Labonte Park as well. It should be important to note that in fiscal year 22, the city actually funded a project to expand Labonte Park. However, when we decided that we was going to repurpose this park, we wanted to ensure that we were going to make sure that this facility is going to provide the highest level of service for our citizens across the city. So rather than act without purpose, we decided that we was going to retain a consultant, Dykema Architects, to help us put together a deliberate plan, which is known as the Labonte Master Plan, to ensure that we're leveraging the park and the new expansion to the highest return on investment possible. Included in that master plan is not only services and amenities, but also branding, which includes signage for Labonte Park. So now that we are moving forward, and it's actually been funded for Labonte Park, the staff feels that this is a great opportunity for us to also take advantage of the time and to do the signage for Labonte Park, but also do the signage for the city as well. And naturally, that signage would have to be somewhere in the TxDOT right away. So please, though we do have the location annotated on the slide, just note that that's for demonstration purposes only. We're going to have more conversations with TxDOT and with our consultants, and the final placement of that sign will be decided at a later date. So gateway signage, I know that we're talking to you about it today in 2022.
One second,
sorry,
Dr. Young, one second. Mr. Vols?
Yeah, can you go back on that slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're proposing, this screen is not dark enough, but where it says city gateway sign way at the top, is that the star you're looking at?
Yes, sir.
Okay, isn't that on the northbound side?
No, sir. The northbound side of the park.
Where is that? I'm trying to orient myself because what I'm
Okay,
looking
to
at.
orientate you to the map,
Yeah, 'cause-
you'll see that we do have the Nueces River that basically traverses the middle of the screen. North of the river is outside of the city, and the city boundary lines starts once you cross over the bridge and cross over the Nueces River.
Right there?
So you'll see the clearing in the area that's noticed, that's annotated as Labonte Park. Where
Yeah.
you see all that wooded.
That's
that
not
wooded
Labonte
area.
Park.
That's-
That star is on the north side going towards Odom. Or am I
sir,
looking at
that's
it? Is it
Labonte
upside
Park.
down? Is it upside down?
No.
Am I wrong?
the-
That's on the north side, Mr. Young. Who prepared this presentation? Who prepared this presentation?
I did, sir.
How long have you been here?
A year and a half.
Okay. Have you ever left the city of Corpus going north towards San Antonio?
Yes, I did this weekend.
That's the north side, man.
Okay, then I made a mistake, sir. I apologize.
Well, that's a big mistake because all your other markers are wrong too.
Okay, again, it's just for demonstration purposes.
That's not a good demonstration purposes in this presentation. Let's wait until they come back with accurate information. That's ridiculous, man. I'm sorry.
Go ahead and continue, Dr. Young.
I appreciate it. Again, for demonstration purposes only, it should be noted that the sign is going to be, the gateway sign for Labonte Park is going to be addressed by Dykema, and at the same time, we want to take advantage of the timing to ensure that gateway signage is produced for the city as well. So again, stating that we're talking to you about gateway signage in 2022, this is not actually a new topic. The city of Corpus Christi actually partnered with TAMUCC back in 2018 to address the lack of gateway signage and the impacts that it has on economic development and tourism. During that time, TAMUCC suggested that we not only have gateway signage at Labonte Park, but basically at the entry points of all the major economic hubs within the city of Corpus Christi, which includes the industrial district, the airport area, and the downtown area. However, what the city is suggesting, or city staff is suggesting that, hey, let's take our time, let's make sure that we get it right with focusing on one entry point at a time, which is Labonte Park, and let it serve as a pilot for us, ensuring that we get our branding right before we do and expand the program throughout the community. Again, just as a reminder, this is the current Levante sign. As you can see, it's old and not very representative of our modern and bustling community. And just to give you a visual of what we're trying to achieve for the city of Corpus Christi now, is something a little bit more modern, where there's color, where there's something that's more representative of the culture and permanence that is the city of Corpus Christi. With that being stated, we currently, as stated before, we don't have our cost estimates yet. This is the very infancy of this program. We're going to be having more discussions with DACMA and with the community, so we can ensure that we put together something that has ownership throughout the community, and we'll be coming back to the Type B board at a later date with a cost estimate and a full proposal for you all to consider for approval for this fiscal year, fiscal year 23.
We have a question, Mr. Harris.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Young, so the Type B board and the A, our focus really is projects that kind of generate economic development. How would a sign, just explain how would a sign or an entry sign or, we're starting to get into the business of parks recently, and we're trying to tie that to increase tourism, but do you have anything that really shows how these particular signs can be tied to economic development, increased sales tax within the city of Corpus Christi?
Yes, sir. What the city staff is focused on is finer points. Yes, we do have the bird's eye view for economic development, where we're trying to recruit large industry and job creating entities into the city. But the reality is the city is a product, and it's a product that we're selling to those third-party agencies. What product does not have some type of branding or some type of trademark? It's like if you go to the grocery store and you order Coca-Cola, but it's the difference between having just a blank silver can and you actually have the Coca-Cola trademark. So what we're trying to do is actually create a trademark that is going to have some, that is going to identify the brand that is Corpus Christi, and we're going to utilize that as the marketing tool and the recruiting tool for those job creating entities across the nation.
And maybe for legal purposes, Amy, is signage, gateway signage, a proper use by law for the use of Type B funds?
I can't cite the section to you off the top of my head, Mr. Harris, but I would argue that this falls into entertainment, tourism, park space, green space sort of improvements.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Young, and I do think it's important. I don't want to leave Dr. Young on the island by himself, because I asked that you present something on signage for the city of Corpus Christi. So, I want to thank you for presenting it, and I'm assuming that we'd have to get with TxDOT as far as the actual location, get approval, things of that nature. But, and I haven't driven a lot recently, mostly flown, and the last time I went to Austin, all the cities as we're going, New Braunfels, San Marcos, you can tell where you're at. But obviously you hope they know they're in Corpus Christi, but, as far as our city landscape of when we actually enter the city limits, we have a huge town here. And I don't think a lot of our out-of-town guests realize just how large we are.
Yes, sir.
So.
I agree 100%. Let's be honest, our community is diverse. If you go up to Cal Island, it's more rural area, and it's a whole different city than if you go down to Padre Island or, even in the downtown area. So, yeah, I think that it's exceptionally important that we ensure that when we have tourists that's coming to the city, that they know that they arrived in the city. And everybody has GPS, everybody has maps. When people enter the city of Corpus Christi, they know where they are. But if we don't have that basic element where we're capitalizing on branding and marketing for our city, then we're putting ourselves just one more step behind the other cities across the state of Texas that's learned about that lesson point decades ago.
Question, Ms. Summers?
Yeah, I spent some time trying to look at what other cities were doing as far as branding and entrance signs. I guess I didn't come across a monument for cities such as San Antonio or Austin is what I was looking for. They more just had the standard population sign, or you're entering San Antonio. But what I did find was, Austin has branded that ATX symbol. And they did have, big lettering where people could go and take pictures with it, where it was more of a tourism feature. I don't know, a gateway sign on the side of the highway is where we want people stopping and taking pictures. I don't disagree. I think, we could come up with some sort of branding, but I'm not sure the gateway sign is, I feel like it is just a park monument. And same thing with the Labonte Park sign.
Yes, ma'am. And let's not look at the gateway sign as an end-all, be-all. The way that the city staff see it is that it's just the anchor, it's just the foundation of what could be. Like how you said, San Antonio does have the ATX. Not only the ATX, they built mottos and almost a whole culture around it. But it's got to start somewhere, and we figure that it's got to be something tangible that we got to anchor ourselves around. You have the Gateway Monument, then you build into a city logo and a social media presence and, mottos.
Right. I just think we have to think about the placement of it. And I don't know, on the side of the highway, that's where we want people stopping and taking pictures. If we want to come up with some sort of city branding, I think, it's great to be strategic about that in your map, showing something in downtown. Maybe that is the better location for these funds to be spent.
Yes, ma'am.
But I do feel like, I agree with Mr. Harris. I feel like it's getting into the business of parks,
Yes, ma'am.
especially concerning Labonte.
I understand. Thank you.
Question,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Valls?
I'm back.
Yes, sir.
So I agree with Diane. I just, that's not really, that's the entry point into Corpus, I agree, but that's a difficult place to put a sign where folks are going to want to take pictures because you can't get off there. You can, but once you get off, it's not as easy as getting back on. Because it's elevated. So, I can see the value in it, but I don't know if maybe that's necessarily the place, because at that point, it's a Y. Either you're going to go to the valley or you're going to come to Corpus.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I can see you want to capture them before they make that decision, but hopefully they've made that decision before they get to that Y.
Yes, sir.
But, I think Ms. Summers is right, that maybe somewhere as you're entering the bayfront would be more appropriate, but not everybody comes directly to the bayfront. Most people will go towards the beach.
Yes, sir.
So I think you have a task at hand in trying to identify, and DICOM is a great firm. What kind of ballpark budget are you giving them? Because when you get the architects involved, it's going to get a little expensive, as opposed to just stamping one out of a book or just going to a local sign company and having them design it up for you. So can you tell us roughly what kind of ballpark? You've got to have given them a ballpark estimate of a budget.
Yes, sir. And the last time we did an estimate on a gateway signage project, it's coming in around $115,000.
Per sign?
Yes, sir. For the sign.
Per sign.
Design. Yes, per sign.
So
design
then we're
and
getting close to
construction.
$500,000 then.
If we did decide that I was going to spend it across the city, yes, sir.
Okay, well, you proposed sites across the city.
Tam, you did. Again, I stated that we wanted to start with one location, make sure that we get it right, utilize it as a pilot, and then we start considering, hey, well, this is something that we want to expand. But for the moment, right now, the city staff is recommending that one location at the moment.
So this came from a partnership with the university?
It came from, I'm not sure where the conversation originally started, but they did ask the university, once they identified that it was a problem, to come on board and do a study and make recommendations on how and where we should do installation of gateway signage across the city.
Okay, so in partnership with the university, and because is the university going to be a funding partner in this, and maybe have the university colors associated with it in some way, or?
Not at the moment. That was a consideration that was being had back in 2018, but at the moment, city staff's recommending that this strictly be a City of Corpus Christi initiative.
Okay.
All right, one last question.
you.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Young, as you're at the city developing a branding, are we talking with Visit Corpus Christi, EDC, people that are working outside of the community to bring here? Because wouldn't they want to use the same branding?
Yes, sir.
Where it becomes recognized? So if you're not doing that, you might consider doing
Oh,
that.
yeah, definitely. The city staff is definitely not making renderings of signs in a silo. That's why, again, this is just a conversation just to get the conversation started, but we do want that time and space so we can engage our community partners and stakeholders in the city to ensure that, what we do bring to you all for consideration, whether it be 3 months from now, 4 months from now, there's ownership across multiple stakeholders and not just the city staff alone. So we definitely have that in mind.
So, Mr. Young, how are you connecting this to tourism,
Okay, well,
the signage?
yes, sir.
You're letting people come in for tourism? or
Yes,
what?
sir. Well, the signage is really.
The people that see this sign are already here in Corpus. Okay, the people that are going to see this sign there at Oasis Park are people that are going to the valley. So it's not for Corpus, it's for letting people know, okay, this is Corpus, that's the valley.
Yes, sir.
And this seems more like a item for Convention Vista Bureau. They get funding for the city. And this should come from the Convention Vista Bureau.
Yes, sir. And I'm tracking, my biggest walkaway from the board is that you all are concerned about location. Location's not set in stone. Again, we do have a previous study and empirical data from that 2018 pilot that makes suggestions for other locations as well. We could definitely take a look at that and see if that's a better fit and bring back a location that'd be more fitting to the board.
Lee, one
We're
last
not
thing.
One last
invested in
comment,
Lockwood Park.
Mr. Harris.
I'll be very short. So the 2018 study, it's A&M Corpus Christi. Can somebody send that to the board members? Can that happen?
Yes, sir.
I may have it, but if it can be sent again, I'll
Yes,
like
sir.
to see that.
Thank you, Dr. Young.
Not a problem, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We've taken up a lot of time. Mr. Houlihan's, it's our guest speaker today. So with that presentation, discussion of the fiscal year budget.
Good afternoon, board members. Eddie Houlihan with the Office of Management and Budget. Going to go over with you today the proposed 23 budget for the Type B. First, the economic development piece. This is gets 50% of the sales tax. So we budgeted $3.9 million in FY22. We're estimating a little bit over that, $4,210,000. And then the proposed for 23 is a 2% increase over that estimated total there. A little bit of interest income for total revenues for proposed in 23 of $4,316,560. Expenditures. I want to point out here that the first item there, the baseball stadium property insurance, was budgeted into A, but after a review, looks like we're going to be a little bit short on funding to fund that out of the A. So we are proposing that we move that to the B, which we were going to do in 23 anyway. But we're recommending that we move the baseball insurance over to the B in 22. So the other items, also moved over from the Type A was the economic development of $125,000. Major business incentive projects of almost $2.1 million. And small business projects was $701,800 that was moved over from the A and for 22. And for 23, the proposed total there is $775,000. We got some detail on this in the slides that follow. Small amount for administration, $2,500. We are expecting the B incentives there for the botanical gardens and where the USO to be paid out in 22. And then the transfer for administrative charges in the general fund, that 23 number is just a placeholder, an estimate. We should be getting that number, final number, in the next 2 weeks. So when we have the next meeting, we'll have the final number for that.
Just a question on the baseball stadium property insurance. So 183, I can't believe we'd be short on the A budget on the 183, so we could allocate that to EDC.
So what happened is that actually when we did the reconciliation to go ahead and move that award that additional amount to the hooks, that the additional $300,000 that we took from savings for the small business agreements, what we did not take into consideration the administrative costs that needed to be paid out for the rest of the year. And so when we awarded that $300,000 to the hooks to finish out their request for about the 1.1 million, we ended up being short. Then we shorted ourselves. We shorted that just a little bit. And so the recommendation is that we take that $163,000 and move it over and pay it out of B. instead of paying it out of A, because A is no longer receiving any type of economic development funding. So that's the reasoning behind it. I think we'll have additional, what we're estimating right now is we'll have an additional $33,000 that at the end of the fiscal year will transfer from A to B to help offset that. But it's that finite amount of money that we're trying to balance for all the demands over in A as we exhaust it.
Okay, thank you.
In the last item there, the transfer to Park CIP in 21, that was in support of the Cole Park Pier project, and in 22, that's for the lighting on the Lozano Executive 9, and nothing proposed at this time for 23. A little more detail, the major business incentives in 23 comprise of the next sports complex for $650,000 and the A&M drone program of a little over $1.4 million for the total of $2,090,000. In the small business projects that again moved over in 22 from the A fund, in 23 you see an increase in a couple of the Del Mar programs, and also an increase from 49.3 to 100,000 for the LIFT fund, for a total of 775,000 for the small business projects. Then the two incentive programs, the USO of South Texas, the 250,000 has already been paid out. Then the 89,000 for the botanical gardens, nothing proposed in that area in 23. And just an overview of the Economic Development Fund, expect to end the year with a little over $7,729,000 in fund balance. And then in 23, expect to end the year with about $8.8 million in fund balance. Moving to the housing area, this is a sales tax of $500,000, a little bit of interest income of $6620 for total revenues of $506,000. A little bit of detail for that program. The infill housing was budgeted at $500,000. We don't expect to expend but about $200,000 in that area, and then budget another $500,000 in 23. The affordable housing, that's gets a little bit more detail on that next slide here. But again, the transfer to the general fund is just a placeholder. We'll get the final number here in the next couple of weeks. Affordable housing, like I said, the detail here: the Salvation Army of $500,000, and the Alma at Greenwood of $1,191,000. Expect that to be paid out in 2022. In the housing incentive, infill housing incentives, again, $500,000 budgeted in 23 in that program. And then from a high level, just the expect to end the year almost $328,000 in fund balance in 22, and then in 23 about $309,000 ending fund balance. Going to the streets, the remainder of the sales tax goes into this fund, 2% again from the estimated to the proposed, so $3,794,000 in sales tax revenue proposed. A little bit of interest income for total revenues of $3,799,810. This was the transfer out there on the second line is the payback to economic development. It's coming up. And then in the bottom line there, the transfer to street CIP, the $1.2 million was Elizabeth Street from Santa Fe to Staples. And then the placeholder there, transfer to street CIP, that project is being looked at to determine what project that's going to be. So that's to be determined here in the next month before we get back to you, what street that's going to be. But we're putting all of the dollars here into production for streets. In an overview, about $400,000 expected in fund balance, and then with the revenues of $3,799,000, and we put all of that into the project, so we don't expect to have any fund balance here at the end of fiscal year 23. I answer any questions before we go into the Lozano
Yes, Mr. Harris?
dropout discussion?
Yeah, two areas. First, let's go to small business projects, slide 5. Lift fund. So we've been consistently, it looks like, 49.3, 49.3. Our estimated actuals are 49.3. What's the cause for the increase in lift fund? Are we just going to get a whole bunch more lift fund applications? I'm seeing Mike pull up to the.
Hey, how you doing, sir? Mike Culbertson with the EDC. So to make this fit, a couple years ago when we were trying to run out A, we dropped lift fund from 100,000 to 49.3, and we did that to make it work. But we were in the middle of COVID, and so what they've been doing, they've been really pushing government programs that provide loans to small businesses, but those are going away. So they need to and would like to get back up to 100,000. Right now, they're not even halfway through, and they've already went through their 49.3, which is okay. I asked them if they wanted to come back and ask for more, since we were in B, they said no, because they'll still pushing the government programs. But again, those are going away, and they could easily get to 100 next year, and they're asking, and we recommend, the EDC recommends doing that.
Okay. Second question I have is on slide 11, infill housing. So actuals, 200, and we're going to have a 500K proposed budget. So is there something that's moving this program faster than what we think, or expectations forecast for 23 that we're seeing something different?
Mr. Harris, the contract amount for 23 is 500,000. That's what's in
Yeah.
the signed contract. So
Okay,
that's probably
So-
why that's what's in the budget.
okay. And do we expect to do
That-
$500,000
She's there
in?
for that one.
We'll be processing 4 applications now between now and 9:30, and at $25,000 apiece. I'm hoping to get an additional 4, and then to double that, at least double that in the following year, yes.
Okay. Okay. You answered my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Valls?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Valls, could you turn your mic on, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I apologize. Let me start all over. So we talked about this last time, about trying to get close to actuals, because they're well below that, I believe, this year. Is that right, Heather? They're in the 25 range ballpark?
Yeah, they have, but they are also they're a calendar year contract. So
Right.
even though we're further into the fiscal year, they've only spent the 6 or 7 months worth of, actually about 6 months worth of expenses. So we will track that. That's one of the things that we will work and refine that number when we bring it back to you in July.
Okay.
And kind of look at that trim, talk with them, and see if they really feel like that they can spend the 100,000. Be the same for Del Mar also. But I know that since COVID the COVID pressures have subsided, I believe that they are anticipating a greater participation. And Mike could speak to that maybe a little bit more.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
That's plenty.
And
Because
they will be here to talk, about each program in July.
Yeah, because what happens is, there's an opportunity cost of not using that money when it gets budgeted and then we don't use it. The same for the housing program, like Scott was talking about. I can appreciate it, but I think we have to, the actuals are what we have to go off of. Now, unless there's some compelling reason that, hey, our enrollment's doubling
Exactly.
or so forth, but they're going to be here next month, you said?
Yeah,
Okay.
they'll be here in July. And like I said,
Okay.
we'll look at those numbers a little bit more closely too.
Yeah, because this is just basically, you just copied and pasted everything from the previous year and just kept moving it forward. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but as we get to the end, we really need to focus on it, because, there's a lot of money here we can probably free up to apply to Mr. Young's monument sign project, you know, without having to impact anywhere else. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Heather.
Or a concern also is we have 125 for EDC. So if someone comes and really wants to come to Corpus and we need incentives, you know, it's not in our budget. So,
Yeah. So a reminder too that we can, you know, if we do have something that big that comes, we can always amend the budget to do that award.
thank you. Ms. Summers?
I would second Mr. Vall's comments on the intern program. I actually pulled last month's Type B agenda because I know we had talked about it, and there was really not much that had actually been paid out in those grants, if any. And so to give them the same budget, I don't know how that works well for our use of dollars. I do understand COVID's been an issue and an impact. So I think when we look at those numbers in July, it would be helpful to have pre-COVID numbers as well, to see if we saw any drastic trend. But I think that would help us make the right decision on that.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment? So for these internships, they are calendar year, January through December. So the report last month would have been January, February, and March. So probably the invoices haven't started coming in. It just so we know. That's why Heather was saying we're going to monitor it for the next meeting and let y'all know.
Right, and I would expect that we would see an increase over the summer, as that's
True.
when most internships are, and so that's why I think we should look at year over year usage of those funds.
Okay.
Question, Mr. Temez?
And I agree with.
Sir, could you turn your mic on, please?
I do. Too late. No, I do agree with Diane and John. I said, because we're not out of COVID-19. Okay, so. COVID-22, 23 by the time we.
Okay. Your question, John?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, continue, Mr. Hulan.
Okay, we're going to let Dr. Young come up and talk a little bit about the Lozano Clubhouse.
Good afternoon, Board. Again, this is one more funding request that we just want to have a conversation today to get the conversation started, but you can expect that the staff will be bringing that down for you all consideration later in the upcoming budget cycle. This is the Lozano Golf Course Clubhouse. As you all are aware, we have two golf courses in the city. We have the Oso and we have Lozano. This year, the city is actually putting in the fiscal year 22 bond, $750,000 for the design for the Oso Golf Course Clubhouse. And what we're asking for the board to consider is partnering with us and basically funding $750,000 to do the design for the Lozano Clubhouse. That way we can go ahead and move forward simultaneously with updating the facilities for both golf courses in the city.
What does design cost for the OSO?
$750,000, which is the same funding that we're asking from the type for Lozano.
Hold on. 750 is the design cost?
Yes, sir.
Have you already selected your firm?
Not yet, no, sir. Again, it's part
I'm going to defer to Mr. Harris on the design cost. Give us a, I mean, that's quite a bit. I mean, it's
Mr. Harris,
not that
you want to
complicated.
jump in?
I'm not an architect.
Yeah, I know, but play
Yeah,
with
but you do charge for that side.
you do cost estimates. Engineers do cost estimates.
Yeah, but building that size, it's a little high.
What is that?
But
8,000, 6,000, 8,000 square feet?
Well, we're actually looking to expand it to 10,000 square feet and turn it
10,000 square feet.
into a two-story facility.
Question, Ms. Summers?
I have the same comment on the design fee. I think that's quite high. But, I mean, I think if we could get an idea of what the square footage is of the facility is, I think when we can break it down on a price per foot, and then you can kind of understand, put it in comparison to what is out there. I mean, architects are expensive, and I understand that, but without any idea of what the size of the facility is going to be.
Yes, so the size of the facility is going to be 10,000 square feet.
It is going to be 10,000 square feet.
So design fees are anywhere between 8 and 10% of the total construction costs, so you're looking at putting in.
A $10 million
Foresight.
clubhouse.
We're anticipating with the cost of supplies and the cost of construction going up, that the facilities are going to come in at around $7.5 million to construct the clubhouse. So that's how we arrived at a $750,000 design.
Comes out to $75 a foot in design fees. I know for residential, it's anywhere from $12 to $20 a foot. So I think that's quite high.
Well, also, these costs have been generated by our engineering services department, and we did utilize previous structures. For example, we're currently working on the police stations, the south side end, the Cal Island police stations, and we did utilize some construction costs for the fire stations as starting points for us to develop our cost estimates. So we did have some. We did utilize some type of quantifiable data to arrive at the $750,000 cost.
So is that just your architecture fees, or is that your architecture and engineering fees?
That's our architecture and engineering fees to do the construction plans for the project.
Okay. But yeah, 10% is pretty standard on engineering fees, or that's my experience with it.
We just think that gone are the days where we're going to be able to build this facility for $5 million, whereas the main is going to cost around 7.5. Which is in keeping with some of the similar size facilities
And
that
then
we have in the city.
using police and fire, those are very special type, special construction, special design, the way those are done. This is a little bit.
Of course,
different.
yes, the security features that you would consider for the police and.
I would say the kitchen and design of the kitchen is probably where you have a lot of the costs.
The car park, but that's a different.
Question, Mr. Temez?
Is Foresight helping with any of this funding?
No, sir, they're not helping with this funding, no, sir.
They're just taking our money and going back to wherever they go.
Well, I wouldn't say that they're taking the money. We do have the partnership with Foresight where it's a 50-50 revenue share, where they're responsible for maintenance, which we don't pay for. They're responsible for employees, which we don't pay for. Operations, we don't pay for. So whether the operation is profitable or not profitable, Foresight takes the loss on that, while at the same time, we're responsible for the capital improvements on the facility. So 50-50 revenue share, but each of us has a burden, our own unique burden on, maintaining and operating the golf course.
Question, Mr. Valls?
Yeah, Mr. Young, I don't have a problem with that. We have the same model with the American Bank Center and Whataburger Field.
Yes, sir.
I'm really excited to see that, you guys really moved this up to your front burner, because we're funding some of the improvements at Lozano on the Executive 9, when I can appreciate that, but as I think Mr. Tamez and Mr. Trujillo and I have stated, the clubhouse is really what needs to work.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying in the 23 budget, you want roughly 750 for OSO and 750 for Gabe Lozano design fee?
Yes, sir. Well, the city is
750 is
taking
from
care.
type
Yes, sir.
A, okay.
Yes, sir.
So I'm okay with that. Is it because it's a budget amount? They may not hit the 750, because I think that's quite a bit for design fee. So are y'all going to put into I heard you say something about upcoming bond
Yes, sir.
proposal? So what if the bond doesn't pass? Then what happens? We've spent $1.5 million on design of.
Well, the city's portion of the design is going to be in the bond. So if the bond doesn't pass, then the city won't have the funding for the design unless we look at other avenues, other funding streams for the design.
And what
So
what
we
do
wouldn't be
you?
out of $1.5 million,
Okay, what do you estimate the total value of the bond to be, ballpark?
$125 million.
Okay, so $125 million is sizable. Another 750,000 is not going to make a dent. Nobody's going to notice that, for the most part. So why can't you just increase the 750 design fee and the bond to 1.5? That way, then the Type B doesn't have to pay for it.
The reality is that we're at capacity with that bond. I'm personally working on. I'm the lead on the bond, and
Really?
I can tell you that $125 million on paper sounds like a long way, but the reality is when we sharpen our pencils and work with the different operating departments, we're at capacity. There's always going to be more want than needs, and that's the reality for FY22 bond. where there's a lot of different initiatives that we want to pursue across
So,
the city.
so in the bond, is the funding for the construction of the 2 new clubhouses also included in that bond?
No, so
Or
that's
just the
not
design?
that's not the approach that we take. The approach that we normally take is we use one bond to pay for the design, then we see that as a continuation project for the follow-on bond. So we do the design in fiscal year 22 with the understanding that that'll be included as a follow-on project for construction in fiscal year 24.
Yeah, see, I think that strategy is a little dangerous on a project like this because when will that next bond be? And
24.
what if the next bond is not successful? Then you've spent $1.5 million on design that's not going to go anywhere. I would have thought that both of these projects, you're estimating 7.5, another 15 million, would have been put into this bond. That way you take one shot at it. Because you're going to go to the voters again in 2024? And then what about 2025? You can go to the voters again?
The bond is every 2 years, and
Right.
unless, Constance, you can tell me, I don't know, I can't recall when a bond has not been approved.
I mean,
or we have
okay, so
successfully
let me go back to the 125. So 125 million is a lot of money.
Yes, sir.
But I understand in government, in municipal government, it's not a lot because there's a lot of needs and everything's expensive.
Yes, sir.
But funding a study with that kind of money, I just think that you should have it all as a package deal. You fund the construction of both of them, and within that amount is incorporated the study.
Here's
I
the
mean,
problem. Here's the problem when you try to bundle it all in, where you say, "Hey, we're gonna request the funding and we're gonna request the construction." Well, construction may be 2 years out.
I hope not, because you're going to go after another bond.
Basically, you're utilizing that construction money as a nest egg, and you're not putting it into production. So years ago, the city got smart and said, "Hey, well, we're gonna fund design, and we're gonna free up that money that would be in construction that sit in the nest egg, and we're gonna put it in production now, and we utilize the next bond as the continuation for it." And I know that there may be some concern, well, what if the bond doesn't fail? But this isn't without precedence. We have plenty of initiatives. We have Yorktown project, that's a continuation project. Bill Witt Pool, that's a continuation project. Name a street, Alameda, is a continuation project. So it's not like this is, we're sticking our finger in the water testing that.
Well, but on a
it's gonna
project
work or
like
not
this,
work.
if you're going to, let's say it passes and then you do the study or whatever it's called, architectural design work, I would hope that it's going to be implemented right away if the next bond passes, right?
As far as the construction, or
Right.
you mean the design?
No, the construction.
Yeah, yes, sir. That's our intent. We intend to ask for the money. The money is
Okay,
approved.
so if we
and-
asked it for it all at one time and it did pass, then you would start design and
No.
construction immediately.
No, because it's not a matter of going right away into construction as if we're sitting on our hands. I mean, it's a process of actually getting the design completed. You got to think about this also, the procurement process, where we have to put together the RFQs. We got to put that out to bid and meet those advertising requirements. You got to negotiate contracts, and that's before you even get started with any architectural firm actually putting the pen to paper. So just doing the design alone is going to be a year and a half process. So while you're waiting for that year and a half process to be completed, you have this nest egg of construction money that you actually could have spent a year and a half ago to address a problem instead of, just nest egging it and let it build up.
Well, the money's earmarked. I mean,
Yeah, it's earmarked, but it's just sitting there. It's not in production. It's not in the streets, not providing the citizens any tangible results.
okay, I don't really understand that, but I'll give it to you. Okay.
Question,
All right.
Ms. Summers?
I do agree with Mr. Vall's concerns around spending so much without knowing if we're going to move forward on this project. Couldn't we just do an architecture instead of architecture and engineering costs? I mean, right now you're proposing $75 a foot to design and engineer this clubhouse,
Okay, yes, ma'am.
which is pretty high. You're all in before you decide whether or not you're actually going to move forward or not. And I guess it's $7.5 million is what you're estimating the total cost to be. That's for a 10,000 square foot clubhouse. That's $750 a foot, and that's without having to pay for the land. I mean, that's already in. That's already there. So I do feel like that's pretty high too. So I do think that maybe it's better if we start with just a preliminary proposal and a design and not incur those engineering fees before we have a design. or commit to paying those engineering fees before we have a design to see if it's something that is worth the cost of building.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I just want to see it happen.
Yeah, it's a valid point, Ms. Summers. 750 a square foot seems on the surface to be extremely high. But we have the proposal included in the 2022 bond for the OSO. So we'll have some report here in the next year or so.
Let me, before I move on, so you're saying you can't add another $750,000 to a $125 million bond package?
I can say that with confidence. Yes, sir. I'm literally am the one working with the engineering department shoulder to shoulder with the engineering leads on the bond, and there's $750,000 not there to address the Lozano.
So what I'm trying to do is get the project accomplished, but preserve the money that we have. But if that's what you say, then I really want to see these projects move forward. If anything, my time on this board, I mean, that's a significant milestone to get these two. I've played golf there for 40 years, and I would be proud to have some part of renovating both of those.
Yes, sir.
But I just can't see how you can't add another, 750,000 to a 120. Okay, all right.
I would like to see this project done too, and I can assure you that I wouldn't be before the type board if there was this huge risk of this project not being completed, or if there was this, this $750,000 that could be found somewhere in the bond. It's simply not there. And again, the risk of a continuation project is very low. We have precedents after precedents after precedents of continuation.
Well, this is the leadership. I wouldn't go on that, so I wouldn't trade on that.
I'm sorry?
I wouldn't trade on that.
Trade on
precedent after precedent after precedent. I mean, there's a whole new team here now.
Yes, sir.
For the most part. I want to continue on this. So I don't think I asked you, or maybe you did say without me asking, what's the budget for the architecture of the monument signs?
Of the monument sign?
Right.
Again, I said that last time we did the cost estimates on it was going to be around $115,000.
And then to build them, total was going to be about $500,000, right?
Again, we was asking for one location, and design and construction, $115,000.
Because if we didn't do any monument signs, then we could use that money and do the architecture here.
True. Or we could do both. Or we can just do the sign, or we can do just the golf course. I mean, there's many ways.
But
all we're
get
asking
too
for is
complicated.
the city is saying, hey, I'm tracking $125 million, sounds like a lot of money. We're telling you it's not there, so we're coming before the Type B board as our partner, saying, hey, we want to address these projects that we feel are high priorities in the community. Type B board, will you all partner with us to help to get this project done?
Well, in my opinion, I see the renewal of OSO and Gate Lozano as more priority than monument signs. So if you're going to take back to your senior staff the feeling of the board, and I don't know about the rest of the board members, but I don't see the monument signs as a high priority, as opposed to renovating or rehabilitating the clubhouses.
Question, Mr. Temez?
Thank you.
This is just the presentation, right, Mr. Young?
Yes, sir.
Diane was asking for figures, for you to come back to us with figures of the architect and the engineering cost. Right, Diane? Later on.
I think if we could split it out and just have our architecture feed and a proposal on the project. I think my point was, I think $750 a foot to build is quite high, and I don't know that would be
And also
stomachable. And so maybe we need to look at the design before then.
And the
But
building
being
has-
all in design and architecture seems to be,
And the building has to be demolished also. That's another cost, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
So, we'd like to see more figures along
Yes, sir.
with
All right.
discuss this.
Moving on.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Are we back to Mr. Houlihan, or are we done with the presentation?
I think the budget presentation had been concluded,
Okay.
so unless you have any questions.
Any last questions, board?
Do we have to have public hearings, right, on our budget, or no?
We will have to have public hearings before we can approve the actual expenditure of the funding on whatever street it is we end up deciding to fund and on all of these projects that Dr. Young has just proposed.
Okay, so we're done with the budget presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hulan. Thank you. Ms. Constance, do we have any executive director comments?
I just wanted to wish Miss Oliveria a happy birthday today. I know she's not here, but today's her birthday. And
Darn
then-
it. Happy birthday, Leah, wherever you're at. I'm sure you're tuning into us, so happy birthday and drink one for us.
And then we'll also be providing the Type B board with that TAMU-CC study that was requested earlier. And that's all I have.
Okay. With that being said, we're adjourned. I'm sorry, Mr. Temez. Agenda.
I want to say probably about a year ago, and it was to mirror what the city council was doing. We previously did have future items, and it was determined, I don't know if it was a legal issue or...
It was a suggestion by one of the city council members that it could potentially cause an Open Meetings Act sort of issue, and so it got removed from all agendas.
That was a best practices.
It was a suggestion from a city council member that it could be a problematic practice under the Open Meetings Act because people would start discussing these items that were not on the agenda instead of just saying, add this one item. And so that was kind of the concern. In response to that policy, we created processes for all of our boards to add items to the agenda through the chairman or through on this board, I believe it's 3 members of the board can add items. It might be 2. I'd have to go check to the agenda.
And then understand you. Are you saying we can bring it back into our agenda?
No, we have a process outside of the meeting for you as the chair, Mr. Trujillo, or for I think it's either 2 or 3 members of the board. I'd have to go look at your rules to add an item that contact the city staff through Ms. Hurlbert.
So we just need to add it to an agenda if we have any new items that we want to.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. All right. With that being said, we're adjourned to 29.